America can keep on giving Ukraine $100 billion every year for the next 10 years. These are the Russians who are telling the world and telling the Americans that you are using Zelensky as a proxy, you're using the Ukrainians as a proxy. Or how can you have a peace meeting for a war between Russia and Ukraine in which Russia is not invited? Only Ukraine is there. There is only one side of the story, which means that the West is not serious about peace. Jai Hind friends, I'm Major Guarav and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Like this video, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. Friends, ever since Russia attacked Ukraine, it has turned into more than just a kinetic conflict. A kinetic conflict is a conflict in which you have troops fighting against each other, hardcore action, there are tanks, explosives, fighter aircrafts, the regular feature of what you would see or what you would think about when you talk about a war. That is a kinetic conflict. This has turned into a hybrid conflict, and also the fact that Ukraine is being used as a proxy by the Americans. At least this is what the Soviets say. The latest in the game is the amount of money, billions upon billions of US dollars being given to Ukraine as aid to help them fight against the Russians. Ladies and gentlemen, the money in question is 60.84 billion US dollars. 60.84 billion US. This is the money that the Americans are about to give Ukraine because the CIA director is obviously, William Burns has said that by the end of this year, he says that, Ukraine is very likely to lose the war unless America supports Ukraine. Now, even if America supports Ukraine, Ukraine will lose the war. America can keep on giving Ukraine $100 billion every year for the next 10 years. Russia will keep on fighting, and here is a problem. And I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is, again, you see, the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now you'll be wondering why I'm bringing Atmanirbhar Bharat into this. This is exactly the kind of scenario that the Atmanirbhar Bharat seeks to resolve and speak about. So what is Atmanirbhar Bharat? Atmanirbhar Bharat says that India will produce its own weapons and equipment. And today, why do the Ukrainians need so much of money? Because they are not producing their own weapons and equipment. The Russians are. The Russians have more territory. So geographically, they're a larger country. They have a larger army. They have a larger navy. They have a larger air force. They have more factories than Ukraine. In fact, Russia has more factories producing arms and ammunitions and weapon and fighter jets and tanks and submarines and aircraft carriers, I think more than any other country. They have this entire military industrial ecosystem, all controlled by the government. Ukraine does not have that. So how is Ukraine to fight now? Here are some research points that we have made out, and I would like to read out from them and explain point by point. Russia claims that the backing of US senators for an additional $60.84 billion in aid for Ukraine signaled Washington's deeper involvement in a hybrid war. So this is not, as per Russia, and I also believe this to be true, that, look at it this way. This is no longer just kinetic. Social media is being used, mainstream media is being used, propaganda machinery is being used, short films are being made, to portray one side as the villain and the other side as the hero. And both sides are doing it. The Russians are doing it, the Ukrainians are doing it, and everybody. The West is doing it. So if you listen to the Western media, you will hear only the Ukrainian side of the story because the Western media is not covering the Russian side of the story. So any journalist who has to go will not go to Russia. Any journalist who has to go will go to Ukraine, and there Ukraine, welcomes journalists and it says go to the front, and then stories are fed. This is done by every army during times of war. There are embedded journalists everywhere. But what the case in point that I'm trying to make here is that it has gone way beyond that now. President Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has caused the biggest rupture in Russia-West ties since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Just imagine. The Cuban Missile Crisis was something that it happened much, much before I was born, but I've read about it so much, This is the stuff of legend now, the Cuban Missile Crisis. what is happening. And I think this is the biggest rupture of ties. This is what they say. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, according to Russian and American diplomats and the US House of Representatives, they passed a $95 billion package. And that was largely for Ukraine, but also for Israel and for Taiwan, a little bit for Gaza also, the reconstruction of Gaza. So the Americans have started putting their money in Gaza. And Maria Zakharova, a spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, accused the US of wanting Ukraine to fight until the last Ukrainian. Now, this is something that the Russians have been talking about. That if the Americans want actually to fight with the Russians, why don't they put their troops there? The Americans are very happy putting their troops in Afghanistan. They're happy putting their troops in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in other hotspots in the world. But I don't think after the Second World War, and please correct me, ladies and gentlemen, if I'm wrong, please correct me. After the Second World War, I haven't heard of the Americans putting troops on ground against a major power. It's always against proxies. So they got involved between 1979 and 89, they got involved in Afghanistan during the first Afghan Jihad, along with the Pakistani inter-services intelligence. They got involved there. They did not confront the Russians directly, and even the Russians, when they had to fight the Americans in Vietnam, they paid the Viet Cong. They gave them weapons, arms, ammunition, explosives, but they did not fight. So both these superpowers, during the Cold War, there has been quite a lot of dancing around. We spoke about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there have been so many times when one party or the other almost launched a nuclear weapon, but then better sense prevailed. Hollywood movies have been made out of that. But here, if we consider all possible scenarios here, where is it heading? These are the Russians who are telling the world and telling the Americans that you are using Zelensky as a proxy, you are using the Ukrainians as a proxy, and you want the Ukrainians to fight till the last Ukrainian, because they're saying that all it costs the US is money, and that money is coming back to American companies. This is exactly what Donald Trump is warning us about, and he's been saying this for a very long time. This is exactly what he's saying. What he's saying is that you see all this money that will go to Ukraine for weapons, right? Which are these weapons? These weapons are weapons made by American weapons manufacturers. For example, the Javelin missile, or the M777, or whatever small arms, or artillery, or anti-tank weaponry, or anti-aircraft weaponry that has been given. It's all American. They're very fine weapons, but they have to be paid for. So what America does is give Ukraine the money, and Ukraine then has to pay back the weapons manufacturers. What is in it for Ukraine? I have not understood till now. They should have spoken to the Russians. They should have sorted it out. The entire country is destroyed. I don't know how many thousands of people have been killed. And so I don't understand. After more than 2 years, what has been achieved? Thousands upon thousands of people have been killed. They're saying over 1 million have been maimed. They may never walk again, or they may never be whole again. And nothing gained. Nothing gained, because I don't know, there is a lobby I feel in the West which thinks that Russia can be defeated by using Ukraine. All you have to do is pump money, and one day they're not going to be able to defeat the Russians. This is a fool's errand. I don't know why people are not telling the United States, don't do this. Get both of them. Put immense diplomatic pressure from across the world. And if India is not taking sides between Ukraine and Russia, it's good. The Americans should tell the Indians, hey, the Russians listen to you. Let's get them on a negotiating table. Why don't you speak? Why doesn't Prime Minister Modi speak to President Putin and say that it might be a good idea to negotiate? Come, sit on the table. They don't want to do that. They are having these peace meetings, peace between Ukraine and Russia. They are having these series of peace meetings in which Russia is absent because Russia has never been invited. How can you have peace, or how can you have a peace meeting for a war between Russia and Ukraine in which Russia is not invited? Only Ukraine is there. There is only one side of the story, which means that the West is not serious about peace. Zarkova, this Maria Zarkova, spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, she says that US's increased involvement in the hybrid war against Russia would result in a humiliating failure akin to Vietnam or Afghanistan. In response to US escalation, Russia vowed to provide an unconditional and resolute response. So this is around a 1,000 kilometer frontage on which the war is being fought. And this war has hardly seen any horizontal escalation, which means that the war has not spread. It has been contained to that approximately 1,000 kilometer frontage. And all these deaths are taking place in that 1,000 kilometer frontage. And the only way to stop it is hard diplomatic negotiations. It can't be stopped by giving $60 billion to Ukraine and telling them to fight. There aren't any men left in Ukraine to fight. The women are dying, the men are dying, everybody is dying in Ukraine. This has to stop. So the United States has clarified, very smart of the US, it has clarified that the US or NATO troops will not fight in Ukraine. So basically, like the Russians very rightly said, they want the war to be fought till the last Ukrainian is alive. America has learned this lesson, and here are some facts. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Vietnam War, which lasted 20 years, 1955 to 75, America lost over 58,000 American soldiers. The Vietnam War cost America 58,000 soldiers. And then they had to leave from Saigon and nothing achieved. Just a war. 58,000 soldiers dead in one war. American soldiers. No accounting for it. And from 2001 to 2021, 20 years, the US-led war in Afghanistan resulted in 2,459 American fatalities and numerous civilian casualties. So this is what it is, ladies and gentlemen. This is Russia's, their foreign ministry's response to this kind of money that is being given to Ukraine, because, and I agree with the Russian position on this. I think Russia was wrong. Russia should not have invaded Ukraine, but Russia was forced to under the circumstances, because it's really crazy, you know. You can't have NATO at your doorstep. Russia is worried about NATO expansion, and rightfully so. But again, this could have been sorted out diplomatically. Now America needs to step in, stop funding the war. This is exactly what Donald Trump is saying. He's saying, I can stop the war in 24 hours. Why does he say that? Is he boasting? No, he's not. It's a very practical point of view. He's saying that Donald Trump understands that this war is going on simply because America is funding this war. Once America stops funding this war, there will be no war. And this is exactly what he proposes to do when he takes over as president, if he wins the elections. If he wins the elections, and if everything goes on right, the first order he's going to do is stop funding this war. End of story. When there is no money, there is no war. And then come down heavily, diplomatically, extremely heavily on Russia and say, hey, thus far and no further. So this is all that I have for you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching this video. And if you like this video, press the like button. Subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to press the bell icon. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai.